Welcome to ESPN's The Far Post podcast. We are back for another international tourney debrief. We absolutely love to see it. We've had the quarterfinals in the Euros. We've had some winners in some of the other continental tournaments. We're heading into the pointy end of others. So there is plenty to talk about. It's going to be another high quality ding dong of a podcast. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands we're recording on today, the Wurundjeri and Gadigal people, and pay our respects to their elders past and present. For today's episode, you have me, Marissa Lordanic, Samantha Lewis, and from a car park somewhere in Chesterfield, Angela Christian-Wilkes joins us once again. So like I said, we have a whole heap that has been going on. We're cracking straight into match chat because these four quarterfinals rather at the Euros, even though we spoke a big game about maybe there being some blowouts, maybe there being some like ridiculous performances, we had, let's be honest, four very tight games, four games that threw up so many questions, so many spanners into the works, and four just really bloody enjoyable games. So let us start with England v Spain. This one was insanity. It was like Spain finally showed up to the tournament. England were rattled for seemingly the first time properly since showing kind of little glimpses of it in that opening game against Austria. But at the end of it all, England are through to the semi-finals and Spain legally dropped the S from their name for a night and really truly were in pain. So let's talk about this game. Sam, England-Spain, talk to me. Thoughts, feelings, vibes.
Oh my God, what a game. What a game. You know, like I was sitting there watching it in probably halfway through the second half and I was like, this is going to be one of those games. You know what I mean? This is going to be one of those games that you remember for a really, really long time. I was just getting that kind of energy from it when England started to really come back into it. And it turned out to be probably, and maybe we even said this in our preview pod, like so far, this has been the game of the tournament. It was so tense and so fascinating. And it was exactly, I think, the kind of game that we all wanted between these two nations, you know, a Spain side who have this golden generation, a Spain side who play absolutely stunning football, who maybe hadn't shown it consistently thus far, but came into this, I think, feeling like they were the underdogs and wanting to prove themselves. And I think that was what really drove them. And that first half was stunning from Spain. I think that was probably their best first half of football that I've seen, not just in the Euros, but for a while as well. They were glorious. And England, you're right, Marissa, they were completely rattled. They didn't know how to respond to this. I think the way that I described it in my my analysis piece was that Spain did to England what England does to other teams, which is just completely overpower and overwhelm them. You saw players usually who were quite calm and mature, like players like Lucy Bronze, like losing her mind towards the back end of the first half because stuff just wasn't working. They just weren't connecting passes. They barely got time on the ball. They weren't able to do the stuff that they had been doing so consistently throughout the Euros so far. And it felt like they didn't quite know how to respond to that. And I think that's where come half time, when it was still 0-0, and it honestly probably shouldn't have been. I reckon Spain probably should have been ahead by at least one goal at that point. I think that's when the influence of head coaches really comes into play. I think Sarina Wiegman sat these England players down and said exactly what needed to be said to them for them to come out and respond in the way that they did. And we started to see, after Spain scored the opening goal in the 53rd minute, through another piece of genius coaching, the substitution of that incredible Real Madrid winger on the right-hand side who just absolutely tore it to shreds. She was incredible. You started to sort of see England find like a different level that we hadn't really seen them need to find so far, perhaps because it was the first goal that they'd conceded all tournament. They were behind for the first time in a really long time. And so they had to sort of dig deep and I know it's a cliche, but they had to dig deep and find that other gear. And they did, and their substitutes really helped in that regard as well. I think that Alessia Russo was really important. Chloe Kelly was really important, and obviously Ella Toon. You know, she, I think, completely changed that midfield, and it was very alien to watch an England midfield with, you know, someone like Fran Kirby, and who just was nowhere. She just did absolutely nothing for the first time that I've seen in ages. So I think big credit needs to go to Serena Weigman for making that call in such a high pressure moment to take off someone like Kirby and throw on someone like Ella Toon, who, you know, it completely paid off. And yeah, this game was incredible. And I'm so glad that we have Angela here, because I want to know what it was like in that stadium. Like, the videos coming out of that game were extraordinary. Angela, what was it like?
Well, I can't really speak to what it was like before the game because I got there just on kickoff. I was at the beach having beers. What can I say? All right. My game day prep was on point. I've changed my mind about Brighton Beach. I quite like the pebbles because you don't feel dirty afterwards. And it does not smell like weed, like Nice Beach. So that's a bonus, you know, it's a bonus. Enough about me, about the game. So that first goal from Spain, so awkward. Just like, because it was about I would say 90% of the stadium was either England fans or people who were just like, well, I can't cheer for Spain right now. And so the goal went in, and it kind of was like, was that a goal? Like, did that happen? Because there was so little, you know, noise in response to it, but you could see Spain running over to their little corner to celebrate. But the atmosphere around that, I think that tension kind of contributed to it being an even more exciting game, because they were just like, every time England kind of got near the ball, or they made a good pass or something like that, there was like a response from the crowd. And I was in a relatively not a neutral section, but I wasn't in the like active end or like a dedicated space for England supporters, but it was all England supporters. And the kids in front of me, they were getting into it hardcore. Like, everyone was into it. It was like a really, really, really fantastic game. And Brighton is quite a large, I think Brighton was the perfect size. It was packed out, and it was just, yeah, it was an incredible game. I don't know, the atmosphere was fantastic. Just made a friend. I don't know if I can say much more than that. Then it was weird. It was good. But and then yeah, the atmosphere after both of the goals, I mean, yeah, crazy. I think it was better in a lot of ways than the opening game. You know what I mean? Because there was so much more on the line, even though the opening game was so much noisier in terms of horns. There was a lot of horns at the opening game. But yeah, this was great. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else special to comment on in terms of. Nah, it was just good. Also, I will say the training top, the fluoro, no, not the training top, the away kit, the bright England away kit looks real nice when it's like dotted through the crowd. I quite like that. I thought that was a good choice from whoever decides what colour the kits are, as opposed to the Netherlands where it looked like shit in the crowd. Have I said that yet? Yeah, probably.
Would you not have said it in your little roundup of the home kits over on our TikTok and Instagram at the Far Post Pod?
Yes, I did. But my take that the Netherlands kit this year, the fluoro one, was too bright against the orange, whereas the bright red, scarlet colour of the England kit against the other kind of tones is very nice. That's what I loved it. But yeah, it's just good game. Good game. I did I will admit, if this had been any other team, I would have been rooting for Spain, but I simply couldn't go for Spain in the circumstances. I went to the game with a friend, and I think that she would have left me in Fulmer. Oh yeah, after the game I got lost again, tried to take a shortcut. Turns out it wasn't a shortcut. It was just like a loop around the bush, the England equivalent of the bush, the thicket. It was just a very scenic tour of the thicket. Anyway.
I I can't. We will get to the Netherlands and being looking shit later, but we'll stick with England, Spain just for a little bit longer. I feel like, and there were some really excellent pieces on espn.com.au. There was one, I'm pretty sure it's from friend of the pod, Kathleen, about how important Alessia Russo and Ella Toone had been as those game changers, those super subs in the group stage, and whether there was a case to be made for them to actually start. They didn't. Serena Weidman's very steadfast in her kind of starting 11 sort of decisions. But as you kind of mentioned, Sam, the literal game changers in this case were Toone, Russo and Chloe Kelly when they come on. So there was a really interesting piece on espn.com.au. Talking too fast. There was also then another piece, obviously, just there's a lot of excitement out of all the kind of England media, the English media, about what could be, what could happen, blah, 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 coming home. You know the shtick. But the kind of other I suppose, question that came out of a game and the way that the game unfolded particularly was that England were forced to show real grit and determination in going down, in not having things go their own way, in those first choice players not producing as they had done in the first 3 group games. So is this one of those, and it feels kind of cliche to say it, but it is a thing, is this one of those games that England had to have to maybe realise how precarious tournament football is, how it doesn't always go their own way? Is this a game they needed to experience?
Yes, I think absolutely, because once you get to the pointy end of tournaments like this, you're going to come up against teams like what England are going to be coming up against in the semi-final in Sweden, where it's almost like glancing into a mirror. It's a mirror version of themselves, and you need to go through moments like this in order to figure out what your limitations are in those moments, so that you can therefore prepare to confront them again later on. So I think that was a really key part of this for England in a technical sense, in like when they don't have the ball and what they look like when they don't have the ball, because for the last 10 months under Weigmann, they have not played a game where they haven't been the dominant team in possession. This is really the first time, and it was quite pronounced, particularly in the first half. And you could see that they were rattled by that, because they hadn't had the kind of match experience to be able to really figure out how to control another team and the spaces in which they played with the ball, because they always had it, and so they could always determine space on their own accord. So that was really fascinating to watch unfold, the various ways in which they tried to do that. And I think, but more to the point, I think what was so riveting and so inspiring about England's performance overall, particularly for England fans, was like the fire. It was the belief that they had in themselves. You know, they haven't been called upon to find that and use that as fuel until this game, really. And you have to sort of wonder what the sort of fallout would have been had things not gone their way, or, you know, remembering as well that this is a Spain side without 2 of their highest goal scorers, Alexia Putellas and Jenny Hermoso. Imagine if they had been there. Imagine what would have happened. You know, like it could have actually been a Spain slaughtering of England. And I wonder what they would have done to the sort of the fragile mind frame of England fans and media when it comes to their national teams. I feel like it would have been fascinating. But that's not the reality. That's not the timeline that we're in. We're in this one, and this was an England team which I think, like when we sort of previewed the Euros and we talked about this England team, on paper they looked the strongest, and they looked the strongest not just in terms of what we assumed would be their starting 11, but also in terms of the depth of their bench. And I think that this is the game that really proved that. Like we saw it in the group games, but this was the game that you actually saw what these bench players are capable of producing when they're called upon, and that undoubtedly gives all, like the entire squad, I think, a new appreciation of what they are, and a new sort of reckoning with how good they actually are across all players, all levels, in all moments. So it's going to be I reckon this was sort of the butting up against the wall game for them. And I think they'll probably learn a lot from this going into the semi-final against Sweden. And I have a feeling that they'll actually play better against Sweden than what they did against Spain because they played that way against Spain, if that makes sense.
I just wanted to point out, I guess, as well, in terms of the coaching decisions, a lot of people were quite critical of, okay, and I just want to say, I went to the article, the How to Pronounce Names article, so I could pronounce this player's name correctly, right? And what UEFA have done, they've simply removed all the teams that are no longer in the tournament. It's like, you don't need to say their names now. They don't exist. So it's just like the semi-finalists. So
they're dead to us.
They're dead to us. So I'm so sorry if I say her name incorrectly. Was it Saragi? Saragi? Do you know who I'm talking about? No, Caldente came off and Saragi came on. And I saw on Twitter people quite critical of this because Vilda had not given her any substantial minutes this tournament, but she was brought on kind of to save the day and obviously displayed a lot of nerves. And so that was one of the things that was like, in terms of like Serena Wagman making very spot on subs and then Vilda kind of making a sub that didn't make sense, or perhaps that he hadn't thought through completely, but perhaps he didn't even think that they would go into extra time, which would, I assume, be almost arrogant in a lot of ways. But so I do feel for Saregi. I'm so sorry if I'm saying that wrong. I'll do better next time. But also I partially blame UEFA here for taking away this valuable resource for numpties like me. Anyway, so that was kind of an interesting moment, I think, in terms of what could have been. And Studs also tweeted about, I thought it was quite funny, they're like, just bring the Huns on. Like they put the Huns on. I don't know if our listeners are familiar with what a Hun is, but I really recommend you check out Huns FC on Instagram because it will really convey that basically England brought on the Huns and they won the game. And I think even though we didn't do a "you love to see it," we all agree Stanway's goal was, a "you love to see it," right? What a cracking goal. That was just spectacular. And I think, what a player she's been. I think very consistent this tournament. We've seen, I guess as well, the other choice was like Beth Mead came off quite early. And that's, I guess, a tough choice because she's a crowd favourite again. You don't want to see that, but she wasn't able to do anything. She was really pushed out of the game. So again, as Sam said earlier, a lot of credit to Serena Wagner in terms of the decision she made in this game to influence that final outcome.
Yeah, I think it's actually really worth talking about Spain's fullbacks because I think they were really, really, really good, particularly in this game. Ona Batya plays for Manchester United, absolutely destroyed Beth Mead. Like she in her pocket, like Caitlin Ford Barter type of areas of Ona. Like that was really incredible. And Olga Carmona as well on the other side. Like she had the best game at fullback that I have ever seen her play. And one of the best games of fullback of any fullback, I think, so far in the Euros. Like she was so feisty. She was so on the ball all the time. She made the correct decisions all the time. The both of them were just fantastic. And it's sort of no surprise to me, I suppose, that both, Lauren Hemp and Beth Mead really struggled against those two players. Like in the first half, the Hemp Batya, like Man City, Man United battle was so, so good. And I think Ona came out of that as the victor because eventually Hemp sort of had to be switch wings effectively because she just couldn't get past her. So that was really incredible. And the substitution as well of Athenia, I don't know how to pronounce it either, but the Real Madrid winger, she was a complete game changer and she absolutely tore Rachel Daly to shreds. I thought that was incredible. But like outside of that, I think I'm so pleased for Georgia Stanway. I'm so pleased because she's sort of been around for a long time. Like I remember watching Georgia Stanway and Lauren Hemp even in like the under 20s Women's World Cup, like years and years and years ago. And they were really good then. And they both sort of went to Man City. But the last sort of season and a bit, Stanway has sort of fallen down the pecking order in clubland, and she's, you know, just got this move to Bayern Munich, and perhaps that's the reason, because she doesn't feel like she's maybe being given opportunities at Man City, or not being played in ways that she wants to be played in order to progress. And you know, as you said, Angela, she's been really consistent throughout this Euros, and like a really mature kind of player. I feel like the Georgia Stanway that we used to know was like the Stanway who 2-foots people all the time and gets basically a yellow card every single time she steps on the field, you know. But she's been so mature and so consistent under Weigmann in this Euros, and I'm so glad that she gets this moment for her, because she's always been a really good player and she's always had talent like this. And I just love the audacity of just being like, because in that you could see her, the cogs moving in her mind when she had the ball. She turned, she started to charge towards the top of the box. You saw Lauren Hemp peel out right, and you were like, well, clearly that's the pass that's on. You know, she's got some space in behind, she'll whip it in. But Stanway sort of like, you saw her look to Hemp, and then you saw her look back towards goal. You saw that one of the Spanish players, I think, just took one step to the wing, and Georgia was like, well, let's fucking go then. And she just absolutely leathered it. And it was so, the camera angle of it was beautiful. I screamed when she scored it. It was like Amandine Henry Champions League final types of worldies. It was incredible. It was such a great moment. And I'm so jealous, Angela, that you got to be there in that stadium for it, because it sounded like it blew the roof off.
If I was Muppy Leon, I simply would have shut Georgia Stanway down, but maybe I am simply a footballing genius. We'll never know. But God, that, as you said, Angela, collective, you love to see it. The Georgia Stanway goal, so good. Jonathan Liu's piece on it in The Guardian, absolutely sensational piece of writing if you want to go read that. You also mentioned, Sam, there, Rachel Daly, talk about like just not having a good day at the office. Someone else who did not have a good day at the office, Austrian goalkeeper Manuela Zinsberger. The poor, you feel bad for her, because God, the goalkeepers have been good this tournament, but Manuela was like, I've got to remind everyone that sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. It was really unfortunate. Germany were 2-0 winners over Austria, and both of Germany's goals could be, you know, linked back to just that tiny little Zinsberger error, which, you know, the Germans will punish you if you give them that opportunity. We've known this for literal years. They have continued to show it in this Euros. It unfortunately is what it is. Angela, do you have thoughts on poor Manuela and just how ruthless Germany were to pounce on these mistakes?
It felt like, yeah, like you said, a bit of deja vu, because this was at Brentford Stadium again, and I was there with my friend Yulia, and we saw the same kind of mistake happen, like only a few days ago, maybe. I can't tell what day it is, what time is at this point but you know, like in terms of the Spain goal that happened with Panos, you know, pooed the bed in a similar way. And you know, I think it's that kind of thing, like a lot of other teams and a lot of other opposition, you might get away with that, but with Germany, they've got they're fit and they're clinical, and and that's just like a ruthless combination when it comes to these kinds of mistakes. Like, and I think it was interesting, watch it pan out, because it's like, yeah, they'll do that. You know what I mean? Like Germany have definitely been the most consistent team. This wasn't a particularly surprising result in terms of how it all unfolded. And yeah, that'll happen. It feels, yeah. And I will say, I guess, because Zinsberger's been so good this tournament, there has been quite a lot of, I think I said that she's the reason they got through. And it kind of makes sense that it's not that she's the reason that they're out, but her performance a lot rested on that. So it feel a little bit sad about that, in terms of that's what it almost came down to. I mean, Austria did have a chance, I was going to say, very early on in the first half of this game that potentially could have shifted it, but it's one of those things. I think it was like the two other quarterfinals. Yeah, you have a chance, but how many chances does the opposition have? And also with, I think the slight difference as well, I know, Sam, you have a take on this. The slight difference between this and we'll discuss the other quarterfinals is also Germany don't have like shots upon shots upon shots or opportunities upon opportunities, even though they were piling on the pressure this game. It's more that it is that thing of like what they do with those opportunities and which opportunities they take. And usually it's the ones that will, give goalkeepers nightmares for life, apparently. So there we go. It was, again, a great game. The German fans are just unhinged. Well, not unhinged, actually. I would say I was going to say there's kind of like a trend with this. I think with some of the fans, like there's nations who have smaller pockets of fans than, say, your Germanys and your Swedens, but those fans go like so much harder. And I think that's definitely the case with Austria and Belgium. And I don't know if you guys saw the footage of the Austrian fan who was just like painted all in red. He was like a devil. He went all out. And like the Austrian fans, they had this little section that were just doing so much work and made so much noise comparative to like how much of the stadium was neutrals and German fans. You really got to give them credit. So shout out to the nuffs out there who showed up for their teams in small but powerful numbers. I really appreciated that about this tournament and I've loved seeing it. Anyway, that was a journey for you all.
Yeah, you're totally right, Angela. I was going to say the same thing about Zinsberger. Like, she has been crucial for Austria to get this far. And that's why it's sort of doubly heartbreaking that it was sort of her two of the only errors really that she's made all tournament has led to them bombing out in the quarterfinal stage as well. And it was we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's such a contrast to the goalkeeping generally in this Euros, because it's been overall, I think, quite incredible outside of just a couple of like absolute brain fart moments. It has consistently been, I think, the best goalkeeping that I've seen in a women's tournament, really. Like, it's been so impressive. But to your point, Angela, about Germany and shots and being clinical, I think you're right. Because like when you look at the stats, even though Germany did outshoot Austria, they only had 5 on target. But the ones that they did have on target, they converted 2 of them, so they might not have the same number of really clear-cut chances as what happened in the other 2 quarterfinals with Sweden and France. But the ones that they did have, they capitalized on them to a greater extent than Sweden and France did. And we'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, it's sort of devastating to see Austria go. I thought that them and Belgium were sort of the 2 teams that we didn't really know a huge amount about. They were the 2 teams we didn't have many expectations of. Nor most people, I think, had very many expectations of them. But I thought that they were both so impressive. I was particularly impressed with Austria. I was impressed with how organized they were. I was impressed with how choreographed they were. They were really disciplined. They were really well set up. They really knew their strengths and they really played to them. And it's just great to see another woman head coach, it's sort of building a team and putting out performances like that over the course of this tournament. So yeah, I mean, no one's surprised that Germany got through, I don't think. Sort of great to see Germany getting to the semi-finals, considering lots of people sort of wrote them off, I think, before this tournament kicked off. So it's good to see them in performance mode, because it's a beautiful thing to watch, even though it is kind of terrifying.
I just also want to brag about something real quick. So I went on friend of the pod. Does that make sense? Anyway, I was flaky and I went on a second pod last. Oh, Lauren in Chesterfield. What's happening? Hello? Did you guys hear that? Anyway, I haven't had my ADHD meds, guys. It's all over the place. I made a prediction on the 40-yard switch, my Wilbur and Jasper's pod. Anyway, the score line, and I got it almost 100% correct. The only thing that I didn't get correct was I said Pop was going to score with her head. So I said that Magul and Pop were going to score and that it was going to be 2-0. I'm a genius. And that's as far as it's gone. My Sweden-Belgium prediction, she's drastically wrong. So wrong. But I was manifesting. I said that at the time. I was manifesting a Belgian win. Anyway, maybe that's a good sign to move on before I burst into tears.
This game, I'm glad you mentioned her. Alex Pop. I now believe in Alex Pop supremacy. I am all about it. I love her. I want good things for her. She's now the first person to score in 4 consecutive games at a women's Euros. It's a ridiculous stat. And we all know the story that this is literally her first Euros. She missed 2013 and 2017. So for her to want something for so long and for it to not only like happen but go well for her, like just a delicious storyline. Absolutely love to see it. Clara Bull, it made me laugh. She had a really wide open goal to aim at and somehow missed it. But then the replay was up on the big screen and the camera cut to her and she was having a little embarrassed giggle. And it was like, you can afford to do that when you ultimately end up winning 2-0. I'm sure if it had been a different scoreline, she wouldn't have found it as kind of, haha, that was so silly of me. Oh my God, like, but it was very amusing for the rest of us. And just, Jesus Christ, the woodwork got a workout in this one. They were pinging them left, right, and centre.
The tournament,
Austria
truly. Woodwork, God.
and Germany. She was having a great game. But let's move on to, Angela just alluded to it. So we had Sweden defeating Belgium 1-0. Linda Sembrant in injury time. Very, very late winner. As you may know, if you listened to our last episode, Angela manifested a Belgium win. She's like, I am adopting Belgium. I have decided I am hanging my hat on Belgium. And then they lost. So, Angela, first of all, my condolences. Second of all, how are you doing? Are you okay?
Yeah. I think I'm fine. But I was talking about, I can't remember who I was having a chat with about this. Oh, yes. I made some friends at the tournament. I just want to say the tote bag, taking the tote bag everywhere has paid off because Amelia, Matt, and Sarah, I was sat next to them 2 games in a row and they copped the pink and like looked up the podcast and now we're friends. Anyway, I was talking to them about this, but with Belgium, I think it's really important that we tread gently. We give them space. It was the Dutch people on the tram, maybe. I can't remember. Too many conversations about football. It's been a delightful month. We need to give them space. We need to, and not put too many expectations on them, right? Because I feel like I don't want to Italy them in terms of, coming into the next big tournament. Hopefully, fingers crossed, they qualify for the World Cup. I think they're pretty close to. But I think that they've got so much space to go and to grow that I just don't want the expectations of them being like the next big underdogs to like hamper them in that space. But in terms of the game itself, I think it played out as I expected in a lot of ways. It wasn't a surprise that they had to play incredibly defensively. And it wasn't a surprise that Sweden absolutely peppered them with shots. I think what was the surprise was how, like, first, not that Everard was good, but how good she was. And I know, Marissa, you have the stats on that, but she just had an absolutely killer game. And that's reflected in the fact that Sweden won and she still got player of the match, I think. And I think also just the fact that overall they were able to keep, it wasn't just her, there was their defense really put everything on the line to keep Sweden out for that long. And I think that wasn't a surprise because I think they've shown that they can do that at other points in this tournament. I think the France-Belgium game is a really great example of the fact that they were able to even come back and push France as much as they did. That shone through in this game, and that's why I think I like them so much, because they just kind of get on with it. They didn't seem to be too stressed. They just went in, and a lot of people have commented on the fact that for them this was the success story. Like, they didn't need to win this game in order to have had an absolutely killer tournament, and I think and I don't know if they were necessarily expecting to win, but it was a fantastic game. And yeah, a friend of the pod, Amy, gave me a lift to the game, and she was like, I really hope it's not a boring game, because some people are kind of expecting it to be boring. I don't think it was at all. I think we've been spoiled with all of these quarterfinals, but this was the one on paper where you thought, oh, Sweden could easily walk all over Belgium, but they didn't. And that was beautiful. Anyway, oh, I'm sad. But anyway, like I said, and also the Belgian fans, they're another example of a small but powerful contingent who get very creative. The man in the chicken costume is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Belgium. They have some absolutely incredible nuffs in their midst. So yeah, shout out to them and to the Belgium team, because I think I love you. Anyway, I also bought so it's like 5:17. I'm in the Manchester Arndale Mall in the line at JD Sports with like the jersey in my hand. And I have to be at the other side of town for 5:25 for Amy to pick me up. And I'm just like, I have made decisions. Yep, I have made decisions. So I have to do scout space all the way there. But it was 100% worth it. I'm very happy with my jersey. Very happy with the choices I've made. I'm very happy with the things that I've backed in, even though I'm wrong.
I kind of feel about Belgium this tournament the way that I felt about Spain in the 2019 Women's World Cup, which is that it sort of feels like the tournament where they've kind of arrived, you know, like no one sort of knew what to expect of them or what they were about. But this seems to be the one where people are like, oh, so this is what this feels like. This is what you are, and this is what you could be. And that's so exciting, you know, like it's so good for Belgium football. It's so good for women's football. And when you think about the fact that Belgium are like consistently in the top 3 of the men's national teams, you got to wonder at what point, you know, that sort of stuff is going to elevate and sort of bleed over into the women's space. So yeah, I think it's fabulous. I think the story of Nikki Everard is just like incredible. She's semi-professional. She works as a bouncy castle operator outside of her football. And she just had maybe the best goalkeeping performance of any goalkeeper at this tournament. You know, like it doesn't it just make you wonder how many players are out there who haven't been captured by the game just yet, who have the potential to be like this. How, like, isn't that so exciting? It gives me such a buzz. I'm so jazzed for her. But when you also look at, you know, to your point, Angela, like this was sort of the game where people were expecting it to be a bit of a walkover. Statistically, it sort of was. You know, you look at the stats, that Sweden had 33 shots to 3. In terms of shots on target, Sweden had 9-0. They had 13 corners to 2. You know, like it should have been a walkover, but it was this one player who ensured that it wasn't. And Marissa, you can probably rattle off the stats now just in terms of how genuinely incredible Everard was, because there are so many ways in which measuring the performance of a goalkeeper is difficult. And we've spoken about this in past episodes about the dub, about Matildas, like how do you actually measure the influence of a goalkeeper? But we're starting to get like statistical tools that really shows how good this is. And there was actually a really great story in the Telegraph in the UK about the fact that women goalkeepers, not just across this tournament, but sort of more generally, are becoming so much better than what they used to be, to the point where they're actually making fewer major errors than what they do in the men's game. It's a really interesting sort of emerging field, I think, of analysis. And I'm really excited to see what's going to happen off the back of this tournament, because also like it reminds me of when, I'm pretty sure Karen Bardsley used to be the Lionesses goalkeeper, said that she didn't get professional goalkeeping lessons from a goalkeeping coach until she was representing England. Like this is such an under-resourced area and such an under-focused area. And it feels like this is sort of the first almost crop of goalkeepers coming out of professional settings, or I guess semi-professional settings in Everard's case, who have really clearly shown that they're benefiting from specialized training. So if this is just the first wave of them, can you imagine what we've got to look forward to? Oh my God.
I simply can't wait for the whole Do we need to make the goals smaller, like shtick to die as these goalkeepers get better and better? But just so shout out to Opta Analyst. Their data visualizations have been so fascinating to me. A fake stato, someone who thinks she understands statistics and shit, but actually doesn't, but likes the pretty pictures. Their depiction of like how they visualize attacking momentum and stuff has been really interesting. I don't know how they exactly calculate that. I would love to find out, but they've been really interesting. But basically, they had a tweet that was based on the quality of shots faced on target for the entire tournament. So the 4 games that Nikki Everard was in goal for, the average goalkeeper would have been expected to concede 9 more goals than she actually did. She just was an absolute
Amazing.
brick wall. Her goals prevented stat was 8.9, and it's 3 times higher than the next best goalkeeper at the Euros, which was Mary Earps with 3. So just the sheer amount of good work she did as a goalkeeper, and even without that level of kind of goalkeeper specific thing, even just hearing 33 shots on goal but only won 1-0, you're like, someone has to be responsible for that. And it was bloody Nikki Everard stopping absolutely everything. We've spoken a lot about Belgium, so just some quick thoughts on Sweden. How do we take this performance? Because it feels very familiar as a Matildas fan to have had a lot of shots on goal. The only thing is that Sweden ultimately got the goal. They got that win, but how do we think about them then heading into a game against England? How do we think about them in terms of the wider picture of this Euros? What do we actually take from this game from them? Because I certainly don't think they've dished up what they probably wanted to, and certainly not what we expected from them. So any thoughts on where to now kind of for Sweden? Much appreciated.
I really don't know. Because when you were asking this question, all I could think of was friend of the pod Tom being like, "Nah, bottle jobs, a lot of them bottle jobs," and I don't know if that's an accurate take, right? Because they're not. They managed to get the job done, and I think they don't seem to. It wasn't even that they were stressing out like England seemed to be doing in that first half against Spain. It was just that the ball wasn't going in the net because, as we've discussed, Nikki Everard was there and she was like, "No, thank you." Not on my watch. But also, I don't particularly understand. This was the most confusing, perhaps, performance in a lot of ways for me in terms of the outcome, because they should have absolutely, sorry, that's not very helpful, but I think it does mean that coming into this game against England, they're going to have a lot to prove. And I think that they could potentially come out, guns blazing. And really, I have seen how England sort of set up against Spain and hope for the best that that's going to happen again and really try to rattle them. But I do think that Sweden have the kind of toolkit to be able to do that. It's not that they're lacking talent. It's not that they're lacking cohesion or anything like that. It's a mystery to me as to why they were bad this game, basically. Sam, do you have any answers?
I mean, they weren't bad. This is the thing, they weren't bad. It's just that it was one of those games where they were coming up against a team who sat deep and defended largely for the most of the game, and they had a goalkeeper who just had the game of her life. It happens sometimes. It just so happened that it was this moment, and there were a good number of chances that Stina Blackstenius had where she, any other day she buries them, type of thing. And we've seen Matildas have that before, right? I remember the performance of Sam Kerr against South Korea, for example, in the Asian Cup. Any other day, she has 3 clear chances that she buries, and we don't have all the fallout that we had. Any other day, Blackstenius buries all of the chances that she's got, and we're not sitting here talking about what we're talking about. So that's what almost makes it less certain coming into the game against England, because we don't we don't know what, because both of these teams are so similar, and they've gone through such different things in the past game. You know, Sweden have had to find a way to break down a very defensive, very organized Belgium, and England have had to try and navigate the maze that is Spain. I think England have a better defense. I think England have a more diverse attack. And so because of that, I think they will edge Sweden, but I don't think it's going to be by a lot, because I think Sweden, like you said, Angela, they're going to probably come out of this Belgian game feeling like they had a point to prove, and they have to do something more. They have to find that other level again, the way that England found theirs against Spain. And maybe coming up against England will be the pressurized scenario in which they find that next level. And we see the kind of performance that we saw pretty consistently from them throughout the Olympics, say, you know, where they were just completely clinical and completely just scythed through every team that they came against. It was kind of miraculous. But I think that one of the standout players for Sweden, the player who pulls all the strings, the player who England need to be probably most wary of, is Kosovare Asllani. She's just been stunning for them. She has done everything. She has covered every blade of grass. She has just, she's completely lived up to, I think, her reputation, or even exceeded it, because maybe she didn't have that big of a reputation for people who weren't really familiar with her already. And in this game against Belgium, she was really, really critical. She was the Bon Marti, basically, of Sweden, and she did everything that she could, all the way down to the final, all the way down to the goal. You know, she took the corner, or the free kick, I think it was, or whatever, to, you know, set up the circumstances for that goal. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see the way in which she clashes with Keira Walsh, because I love Keira Walsh. Everyone knows I love Keira Walsh. I love a classy number 6. And those two going head to head is just going to be, something to behold. So I'm really, really excited for this game. I think that in a different kind of way to England, the excitement of England-Spain, because I think we knew it would be, we sort of knew in England-Spain that Spain would have more of the ball, and therefore England would set up in a certain kind of way. Both England and Sweden, I think, are more similar to each other in that sense. I don't think one or the other are going to be the more dominant or the more defensive in terms of possession. And so by virtue of that, I think it's going to be very attacking. It's going to be really transitional, and it's going to be really fun. Hopefully there's a bunch of goals, because I love a tight game. Of course, it creates really good pressure, creates great tension in a stadium, but I also want to see a bunch of really good goals. I feel like we've earned that.
Mm-hmm. Also, do you reckon it's going to be a bit of crash bang? Because the England-Spain game towards the end there got quite gritty, maybe because of the high pressure environment. But do you reckon there's going to be a bit of argy-bargy? Because I hope so. Oh, I hope so.
I reckon if there's not a couple of goals that have been scored by like an hour, I reckon it's going to start to get pretty Georgia Stanway 1.0, you know. Just go clean them up and see what happens.
I hope that not in any way that is dangerous. I'd like to see a bit of nip. I think that could be really fun. And it makes the atmosphere so much more exciting when people hate the ref as well. So, well, there's a balance there, right?
I would describe it as a bit how you going. If it starts getting a bit how you going, then yes, that's what the people want. Anyway, there was one final quarterfinal. This one, I feel I wasn't 100% right, but I wasn't 100% wrong either. It was France winning 1-0 over the Netherlands. It was a Perissé penalty in extra time. We had to go the full 120 to find a winner. Another really bizarre game where France were ridiculously dominant. The stats sheet reads unbelievably in favour of France. It was just such a weird game. I literally have written on my notes here, it simply makes no sense, because it simply made no sense that France attacked that much and with that ferocity. And Angela, you pointed this out in the group chat. It almost feels like a little bit of a cop-out that they won via a penalty, considering everything that preceded the penalty.
I'm so angry, right, about this game. I'm just like Sweden-Belgium sad. This game, I'm just I'm angry about a lot of things. I just first disclaimer: drank more beer at this game than I have at other games, so that potentially influenced what I saw, how I saw it, how I responded to it in the moment. If you saw me screaming at the selection for player of the match, no, you did not. That was someone else. But I thought it was incorrect. I thought anyway. Not that Basha had a bad game or anything like that. No disrespect to her. I'm sure she's great, whatever. But that's the issue. Okay, France were great. They played sexy, right? But they didn't. The fact that they won on a penalty has made me so furious because they shouldn't have done that. They should have. It would have been more honourable for them to slaughter the Netherlands, and they didn't. And so the fact that it was a penalty is just, it makes me really mad because I wanted Netherlands to win, but you could see that they've just had such a, tournament. And that's another reason why I'm kind of like, I'm not necessarily angry about that. I'm more like the news. I don't really understand what's going on with them. I was chatting, so my friend Ruth, she got here on Saturday and we travelled from Manchester to Rotherham to get to the game because she was like, I want to party with the Netherlands supporters just one time because she's been held up with Miss Coco. Anyway, so she's here and she got to see this game and then she gets to see her team just lose in a dismal fashion, I guess. But she was like, oh, they weren't good at the World Cup either. And I kind of have to, in hindsight, I'm like, okay, I kind of see what you're saying there. They weren't at the peak of their game, but they've dropped off even more, even though the playing group hasn't changed that much. And I want to know what's happening, what Mark Parsons is telling them to do, what he is doing. I'm blaming that man. What is because they weren't threatening really at all this tournament. And I don't think it's just, you can't really say, oh, well, it's because Miedema had COVID. I don't know if that's a good enough excuse when you have players like Vanderbilt, when you have players like Martins up until her getting an injury, when you have players like Jackie Gronin, Jill Roord, you know what I mean? They have the this has gone old man territory now in terms of the texture of this rant. But my point is the fact that France won on a penalty, that shouldn't have happened. It should, I think, and I'm sure that they probably feel a bit annoyed about it too. But it just felt a bit pathetic, to be honest. And I hope that they actually score some goals next game. But also, I don't want them to win at this point. I'm off France. I'm very flaky. It doesn't take much. But, yeah. And also, I do wonder, I think what we're talking about with Germany, if they thought that, I'm trying to think of which has been, that Belgium was probably the most defensively challenging game for France, but Germany is going to be a whole other ballpark, right? And so what are they going to do? What can they bring out if they can't even score against the Netherlands? I will say that, and also my player of the match was I can't say her name properly. Ruth has been trying to teach me, I can't do it. Van der Gracht. I thought she had a great game. She was a big reason. And if we're talking about keepers as well, then Dolschmuller. You all know what I'm talking about. The tall lady in green. She had a great tournament and performance as well.
Our gal Daff is what we should call it.
Our gal Dash.
Our gal Daff.
Yes.
Anyway, Sam, you probably have more measured takes that weren't influenced by beer. If you were drinking beer at 5
No,
I
like the balance that we've struck on this pod, where Angela is sort of just the vibes takes, and then we sort of have to pack in some analysis around the vibes. I like that this is the balance that we've struck. I think that this is good. The goalkeeper I thought was sensational. There were a number of saves that she made, particularly towards the end of the game. There were two Wendy Renard headers, particularly the second one where she just launched her, you could see from the camera angle that Renard's header from a corner was going straight into the top pocket, but the goalkeeper she just came from nowhere. She sprung from nowhere and somehow got her fingers to it and tipped it around the side of the post. It was just incredible. but like in the same way that Sweden Belgium was sort of, you know, on any other day they should have won. France Netherlands was on any other day they should have absolutely like killed them. You know, like if you look at the stats again, 33 shots as well as Sweden. Sweden also had 33 shots to 9, 13 on target to 1. And that's just, I guess, another example of just how critical the goalkeeper was in this particular situation. 10 corners to 5. You know, like they had so many chances, and when they had so many like blatant chances as well. Like there was the Grace Gaoro header, which she would have buried any other day at the back post, but somehow went wide. There was a chance to, I think, Mallard, who just sort of found herself on the penalty spot with just acres of space in front of her and somehow shot straight at the goalkeeper. You know, like just so many moments like that where like a degree or two any other direction the ball goes in. But yes, it's sexy football. I love France. I want France to do well because their players deserve it, because players like Renard deserve it. They've worked so fucking hard for such a long time, and they are almost like, it feels like they're succeeding now despite Corinne Diacre being there. Like they just sort of have to bring it out of themselves to try and make this thing work. How they're going to go against Germany without Marie-Antoinette Katoto is going to be really interesting, because I feel like she has not been replaced in that centre forward position, not just in terms of her ability to score goals, but in terms of what she does off the ball and the chemistry that she has with Gianni and her ability to bring other players into things, particularly Delphine Cascarino. I think that since Katoto left, Cascarino hasn't quite been as effective on the wing as what she used to be. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. And I also don't really think that France come out of the midfield battle against Germany as the winners. I think Germany will sort of dominate in midfield, and that's perhaps the reason that they'll win the game. But like, we have to talk about the Netherlands, because what has Mark Parsons done to them? Like, this is not the team or the performances that these players should be doing. Like, it reminds me so much of Norway. Norway have the players to be playing in a way that is so much better than what they are showing. They looked so disorganized. Like, yes, Van der Gracht had a great game, but she, like in all of the situations in which she stood out, there was just chaos around her. You know, like the Netherlands didn't seem like they knew what they were doing. And, you know, her clearance off the line, for example, like, you know, all that sort of stuff. It's just, yeah, it's kind of shocking. And I almost feel bad for Viv, because she was brought into this game coming back from COVID. Who knows what her actual sort of levels of fitness are, you know, like she could still be suffering from the consequences of having COVID. But she just sort of ran around a bit, and she didn't really do a whole lot. And it just feels like such a waste of talent to see them organized in this kind of way and playing this kind of football. And I don't really think that you can put it down to Parsons maybe hasn't had enough time with them, because you see someone like Weigmann, she's been there for less than a year, and this is the way that England are playing. You know, like she's been able to institute a style and a system of play that gets the absolute maximum out of the talent that she has. And I don't think Parsons has done that. In fact, I think he's done the opposite almost. I don't think he really understands the kind of quality maybe that he's got, and is sort of forcing them to play a kind of football that they are not used to and that they don't flourish in. And that's sad. It's always sad to sort of see that. It's the same as Norway. So yeah, anyway, that was a ramble, but I'm really, really looking forward to France, Germany, because I think Germany is going to be the first real like holistic test that France are going to come up against this tournament. Belgium, yes, was a defensive test, but I think Germany are going to be like the test everywhere, and good, because this is what these tournaments are about. You need to be the best team. You can't just be the best attacking team or the best defensive team. You have to be the best team. So it's, yeah, both of these semifinals are going to be absolute crackers. I can't wait.
I guess just another mean take about Mark Parsons, which I said this in the group chat, but I guess the sense as well, it doesn't feel like this Netherlands side are playing for him. You know what I mean? And I think that they come across as a very like close-knit team just generally, and I think that's why a lot of people really love them as well, because they're a team's team, but it's if Serena Wagman is like, they're doing it for her, they were not doing it for Mark Parsons this tournament. And I think it is interesting with France as well, because obviously there's all the stuff around the internal tensions there and the relationship the players have with Corinne Diacre, but you could still see that they're digging deep and that they play for each other. I think everyone just plays for Wendy Renard, right? That's what you want. Which reminds me of that little clip after the game where Wendy Renard is patting Danielle van der Donk on the head, and Danielle van der Donk says to her, she's like, win the tournament. And I'm like, oh. I think that's really cute. I do agree, Sam. I'm not going to stay mad at France for long because I love Wendy Renard too much, but with the Netherlands, it's a weird one. Does he stay on after this tournament? Surely not, right? Surely this has to count as quite a bad showing, I guess, in terms of if you look at how they gotten to where they got and how they crashed out. But anyway, and the other thing as well, I guess, the kind of decision making around Miedema playing 120 minutes when she just recovered from COVID, that's kind of been discussed online as well, and you do have to think about that. Anyway, I don't know Mark Parsons, don't know the guy. Haven't had particularly strong feelings about him until this game, but now I'm kind of like,
Things that make you
anyway,
go.
Things that make you go.
I do wonder what Dutch soccer Twitter was like. Were they kind of like imploding, or did they kind of expect this? I don't know. I'm not on Dutch soccer Twitter, but fun little, just quick Far Post trivia. I have a question for you. The player with the most shots at Euro 2022 so far. Any guesses you would like to offer up, either of you?
Oh, that's a great question.
Shout out once again to Opta Analyst. I simply am living on their Twitter feed at the moment.
Ooh, I want to say Aslani.
It's a good guess, but it is incorrect.
Why am I offended?
I'm gonna say...
I'm right. You know it.
I am going to say Grace Gioro.
Closer, but still no dice. The player with the most shots.
Wendy. It's Wendy with the bonds.
It's Wendy with the bonds.
Is it Wendy Renard? Oh my God.
15 shots. No goals. 15 shots, no goals. Literally most of them, as you literally just with the bonds, bonking them with her bonds. Has like an XG of 1.6, 4 games, lots of headers, and kind of from like penalty spot onwards. So it's not like they're long range efforts, but 15 shots, the most of any player at this tournament, but no goals either. So fun little trivia for you there.
But let's do. This is why I love her.
She is your favourite for a reason. But let's quickly do quick tips for these semi-finals. So we have England, Sweden, Wednesday, 5 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, and then Germany, France, Thursday, 5 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So quick tip, you simply need to say one team's name. So England, Sweden, Sam.
England.
Angela.
England.
Germany, France, Sam.
Germany.
And Angela?
Germany.
I also think
but this is like I
but
said
this is not what
last time and it didn't go that way. This was what happens with me. I can't predict things. The opposite is going to happen of both of those things. But Sweden and France are now going to win both of these games. But
I can predict things, Sam. So it's fine.
So we like cancel each other out. We're like that scene from
yeah.
Avengers where it's like the Captain America's shield and Thor's hammer, and it just like clangs together and it just creates like a black hole. That's what we are.
Yep, that's what's going to happen. The Euros actually, it's all going to fall into the ground. The games aren't actually going to happen now. We've cancelled the Euros. I'm sorry.
We've cancelled the Euros. Too powerful we are. We've cancelled the goddamn Euros. Who boy wowee. So, as I said at the top of the show, there are other international tournaments going on. So, we'll just do quick wrap because, as I've said repeatedly, the Euros are really the only ones we can watch with any sort of, ease. But we had a winner at the Women's African Cup of Nations. So, it's a huge congrats to South Africa. First time winners, truly unbelievable. They have come second 5 times, including most recently in 2018, which was the last WAFCON that was held because 2020 was cancelled due to the Roni. So a huge deal for South Africa, for South African women's football. They were so excited. As we've said previously, the tournament's being hosted in Morocco. South Africa defeated Morocco 2-1, but the crowd, oh my God, they were going off. It looked like such a great atmosphere. I know a lot of those people, or almost all of those people, would be disappointed that Morocco didn't get up in the end, but huge congrats to South Africa and huge congrats to Morocco because we will be seeing them next year at the World Cup. So it is very, very exciting for both of those teams. We're getting into the pointy end of both the Copa America and the OFC Women's Nations Cup. Chile has finished 5th, so they will be heading to the Intercontinental Playoff Tournament in New Zealand next year. Not a great tournament from them. I think we all kind of assume that they're right up there in terms of South American nations, but they were not delivering at the moment. So we'll have to see if they can find a way to Australia and New Zealand through that Intercontinental Playoff Tournament. We have 2 semi-finals coming up, Colombia v Argentina tomorrow and then Brazil-Paraguay on Wednesday. So Brazil are looking the goods as they usually do. They are the most dominant team in South America. And then the OFC Women's Nations Cup, I was saying to Sam pre-record, first and foremost, I want to give commiserations to Vanuatu. There were only 9 teams at the OFC Women's Nations Cup, and it was a quarterfinal. So a quarterfinal needs 8 teams. So of the 9 teams at the OFC Women's Nations Cup, only one of them was not going to make it to a quarterfinal, and that was Vanuatu. So pour one out for our Vanuatu friends who were the only side to not make it to the quarterfinals. But we've got semi-finals in that competition. It's Samoa taking on Papua New Guinea and Fiji hosting the Solomon Islands. So we're going to have a new winner in that tournament because New Zealand have not taken part in it, which means we will have a new champion in that tournament as we did in WAFCON. So very exciting. Another bit of fun trivia, because apparently I'm really missing trivia right now. Only 3 teams have ever won the OFC Women's Nations Cup. New Zealand, Australia. Any guesses for the third one? It's not who you think, because I was certainly surprised. I feel like I need to get some thinking music in here because I've been asking you guys too many trivia questions.
It's a really good question. Why does Chinese Taipei come out of my brain? That's
Samantha
nothing,
Lewis. Samantha Lewis.
No.
You've only gone and done it. Chinese Taipei, Taiwan. Taiwan used to be a member of the OFC. So they have won the OFC Women's Nations Cup. So there's a fun little trivia fact for you once again.
Gosh. Amazing.
Truly. Like I said, I looked at the Wikipedia page and I was like, well, haven't I learnt something today? But as we said, those tournaments will obviously once again have Women's World Cup ramifications. So as we get closer and closer to finals, we can talk about what's happening for 2023 for that Intercontinental Playoff Tournament as well. There's lots to look forward to. But that is enough from us for this episode. We will hopefully be back to review the semi-finals and then have another episode post Euros final to wrap everything up and just have another high quality ding dong of a podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Remember, you can find us on espn.com.au and the ESPN app. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Friends of the pod, Sophie Lawson and Kathleen McNamee, are producing some absolutely cracking pieces on the ground. So definitely check them out if you want to read some Euros takes as well as listening to some Euros takes from us. We're on all the podcasty platforms, your Spotifys, your Apples, your Googles, wherever you listen to them. You can follow us, subscribe, leave a review if you like what we're doing. Angela is still doing all the things on social media, so follow us at the Far Post Pod to keep up with everything that she is getting up to. But until next time, Slayers!